back, everyone. I'm Amberly, and in this video, we're going to be continuing our Dr. Office check-in program while rounding out our input-output skill set with getline and the see and .ignore functions. But before we get started, I just want to say that I am feeling so dang proud of you right now for coming back for more and just sticking this out for yourself. I know it's a lot. Trust me, oh, do I know. If you're feeling overwhelmed right now, the best way to fix that is to gain confidence in your understanding of the material and your ability to apply it. So how do you do that? I bet you know what I'm gonna say. Practice, practice, practice. Rewatch these videos as many times as you need, and when you feel good about it, move on to the next one. If you need additional help, a different perspective, have it explained in a different way, man, there's YouTube, Stack Overflow, Reddit, C++.com. The internet is a wonderful and dangerous place, right? So I'll leave some resources for you after this video, but trust me, if I can do this, you can do this. Speaking of doing it, in this video, we're going to learn how to collect input directly from the user and then use that to initialize a variable of our choosing. This is so much better than hard coding and is the preferred method for initializing user data. Let's get started. Here you can see me responding to prompts on a form. As the user, I'm shown a question, I type in my response, and then I press enter, which tells the program that I'm done responding. As soon as I press enter, the data that I typed in is used to initialize whatever variable has been specified on the back end. Here's what that looks like. A cout statement displays a prompt to the user, followed by a cin statement that allows the user to respond to the prompt. If you think about it, filling out this form is kind of like the dynamic of a dialogue. When you're having a conversation with someone and you ask a question, it's natural to pause and wait for them to respond. As you can see here, that's kind of what's happening with me in the computer. I'm given a question, I give my response, and then we move on. It's important that when you collect data from the user, you remember to keep it conversational. What I mean by that is, you want to keep that question and answer dynamic, but you also need to make sure that your questions, your prompts, are given in an instructional but conversational way. For example, check out this interview. Hey guys, welcome back to Amberly. Today we're here with Martha, student advocate, professor, and data science expert, to answer some questions about her foundation's super successful year last year. So Martha, you guys had a great year. You really had some excellent fundraising. I heard. How much did you get?
Well, last year we had some very generous donors at our fundraisers. We raised about 2,699,972 pesos in total.
Oh, that sounds like a lot. That's so cool. Congratulations. Well, I also understand that you founded this foundation at a really young age. Is that right?
I did. Well, and I still consider myself young, but at that time I was about 280,320 and a half hours old. That's probably about your age, right?
That sounds a little high, but that's so cool. You were able to accomplish so much at that stage of your life at that time. Thank you so much for coming on today. I'm a big fan, and it's so great that you've been able to do so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
If that had been a real report, that would have been a lot of extra work for me to do those conversions before I turned it in. What if it had just gone like this instead? Hey guys, welcome back to Amberly. Today we're here with Martha, programming instructor, data science expert, and student advocate. We're going to be talking about her foundation's very successful year last year. So Martha, I understand that you guys had a great year last year and you had some really great donations. Is that right?
We did. Last year we had some very generous donors at our fundraisers. We raised about $150,000 in total.
Wow, that is incredible. You'll be able to help a lot of students with that. I bet you're very pleased. And it's very successful, and I understand that you also founded this at a young age. Is that right?
I did. I still consider myself young, but at that time I was only 31 years old. That's probably about your age.
Oh man, that is. You guessed it. Very nice. I am. Nailed it. I love it. Martha, you're so good. I'm such a big fan that you've been able to help so many people. Thanks so much for coming on today.
Thank you for inviting me. It's a wonderful.
Ask Asking for the information that you need in the format that you need it is a great way to save yourself some effort and processing power down the line. Let's keep this in mind when we ask our patient for their check-in information. If you're going to follow along with me in this video, pause now and resume when you're set up. Alright, so here we are in our program where we left off on our last video about variables. Just in case you missed it, I'm going to do a quick review here real quick and walk us through this. So the point of this program is basically to just have a patient kind of check-in or confirmation like you'd see on a kiosk when you go to the doctor. And so here we've got our variables that have patient age, weight, and name, and these have been initialized to these values here. Our cout statement is just going to print this on the console so that we can confirm it with the patient. We have a second block here of the same variables, but they've been initialized to a different value. You'll see down here that the cout statement is also the same as this one, but it prints these new values because that is what was most recently stored. So let's go ahead and run this real quick just so you can see it. Okay, so this is what our program looks like right now. So here we have our first block, thank you Patrick, confirming the age and weight, and then here is that second block which has Mary's information, and again that's because here on our back end that was the most recent information being stored in those variables. Okay, so what we're going to do today is rather than having this information hard-coded in our program, we are going to change this to collect the information directly from the patient. So let's get to it. Since we're going to be initializing our variables from the console, I'm going to delete the values that we've already got here. Okay, and we can also get rid of this. Okay. Now we're just left with some declared variables that are begging for an initialization. So let's give it to them by writing our cin command. Now, where should we put that? Like what about right here? We're already here, right? Using the cin command is very similar to using cout, but instead of cout, of course, we're going to type cin. We still need some carets, but they're actually going to face the opposite way. So with cout, this is carets indicating an output, and here with cin, we're going to face them this way because it indicates an input. Carets are actually used to indicate the directional flow of data, and it's kind of funny because the way that I remember which direction my caret should be pointing is actually opposite of the direction of the data. So what I mean by that is cout is printing out to the console, but it kind of looks like the carets are pointed inwards, right? Whereas with cin, which we're gathering data from the console and bringing in, it kind of looks like they're pointed outwards. So just a little trick that I like to use. But now that we've got our cin command here and our carets, we now need to specify which variable we want to initialize with the user's data. So let's go ahead and start with patient name. And then of course, semicolon. And then we'll go ahead and do patient age and patient weight. Okay, great. In the tech industry, you'll eventually come across the term modular programming. This is a software design strategy that focuses on building the functionality of a program in chunks for flexibility. The benefit to this is that by having each function as its own code block, you can design your program to only run the code that you need, which saves processing power, and it also makes it much easier to narrow down where issues might be occurring in your code because you can test each aspect individually. What I want you to take from this is, as you develop your program, run and test the functionality as you go. Whenever you write up a new function in a program, it's always best to test it right away. That way you don't add like 5 new features, run into an error, and then have to go back and figure out which one of those 5 is the culprit. So let's go ahead and run this and make sure it's working as intended. Uh-oh. Okay, we're getting an error here, so let's go ahead and take a look. All right, so this is giving us an error that says uninitialized local variable patient weight used. So what this is telling us is that here on line 12, we're trying to call a variable, patient age, and it doesn't have a value. So if a variable hasn't been initialized yet, then we can't call it because there's really nothing there to call, right? Since the compiler works its way down the program line by line, that means that we need to make sure that our variables are initialized before we call them here on line 12. So what if we take these, because this is for initializing them, right? And we go ahead and just cut them and put them up here. Okay, now let's try and run this. All right, and there it goes. We're compiling. All right, so our program compiled, but now it just seems like it's frozen. At least that's what it looks like, right? But you and I know that what's actually happening is that on the back end, we have hit our first CN statement. So it's waiting for us to give the patient name. But without any sort of prompt for that question, how would the user know that that's what they're supposed to do? So let's clear this up for them by writing some solid instructional cout statements. Okay, and just to save you guys having to watch me type that out, I'm going to go ahead and paste in our prompts. So now we are going to prompt the user, please enter the patient's full name. They'll have a chance to respond with CN, and then we give them the next question, patient's age in years, and then the patient's weight in pounds. We'll collect all of that information and then just display it back to them. So again, let's test this. Okay, here we go. This is much better, right? So Patrick, and then let's say Patrick's last name is Smith. Nice and easy. Oh, well, what happened here? It just totally skipped the rest of this. We didn't even get a chance to enter this information. I wonder what's going on. When the user enters data from a keyboard, each keystroke gets stored in a temporary storage buffer in the computer's memory, just like this. When they're done responding, they're going to press enter on the keyboard, which gets recorded also as a keystroke, and that gets saved here as a \n. At that same time, that also tells the computer to start initializing whatever variable we've specified with everything that the user entered. Now, as developers, we have a couple choices on how we want to collect our input from the user. CN is totally the way to go, but there's actually 3 versions of the CN command. 2 of them are used to collect input. We'll get to the third one in just a bit. We're going to start with the OG CN command that we've been using up until now, CN. So I'm going to write here CN, and then we're trying to populate our patient name variable. Okay, so this buffer will represent that. Now, the next one is actually a function of the CN command called getline. And because it's a function, we're going to write it just a little bit differently. So first we write our function name, and then we need our opening parenthesis. And because this is a function of CN, we're going to write CN and then a comma to separate it from what comes next, which is going to be the name of the variable that we want to initialize with this information, which again, we're working with patient name right now. Okay, and let's not forget our semicolon. Don't worry too much about the term function right now. That'll come later down the line. Now, getline is very similar to CN. It's a function of. The difference between them is how they read this information out of the buffer and into the variable. Now, good old-fashioned CN is going to go like this. It's going to start reading here, and then it's going to go through and read each character just like this. And as these are read, they get written to the variable. Now, CN stops reading when it gets to a space or a new line character. In our program, the way we have it structured right now, it's going to get right here, and then it's just going to tap out. It's like, oh, I'm done, nothing else to record. And this is how we ended up with just Patrick as our variable value in our program earlier. Now, getline, on the other hand, is going to start in a similar way. It's going to read all these characters, and then it's going to get to the space, and it's going to keep going. And getline is going to read all the way till we get to a new line character, which we should have right here, actually. And remember, this is when the user pressed enter. So getline reads all the way to here. So we will be able to collect the user's whole name. So we would want to use getline because we're going to read through the space. All right, now before we get back to coding, we've got one more CN that we need to talk about. So these are our two buffers. We've got one for CN, one for getline, and we know where they're going to stop reading based on their individual functions. Now, when that happens, as this information gets written to the variable, it gets removed from the buffer. So as CN begins to initialize each of these characters, as they're read, they kind of just disappear here from the buffer. Now the problem is that, as you can see, this leaves us with some residual information in our buffer. Now in the program that we've been working on, after we do the patient's first name, we ask them for their age and weight. Now, when our compiler gets to these statements, after reading these, what do you think is going to happen? It's going to get here, it's going to go look at the buffer, and it's going to go, hey, there's information here. That's what I needed. That's so perfect. And it's going to grab it and try to put it into our variable, which is not what we want, right? Not only would this not be the correct information, but our program is going to consider this statement fulfilled. On the user side, it looks like the question just got skipped, that they didn't have the opportunity to respond. So to keep that from happening, we can use the final version of CN, which is cn.ignore. This is also a CN function. And we know that because we have parentheses right here. Again, don't worry too much about that term function right now. So right now, CN is hanging out right here in our computer buffer from having read patient name, right? When it gets to cn.ignore, it's going to go ahead and continue to read anything that was left in the buffer up to and through our new line character. Now that works perfectly with getline because here all we had remaining was a new line character, but that would still cause the same effect of trying to populate this variable. Okay, so this would move us all the way to the end. Okay. So now, when the CN command hits, there's nothing further in the buffer to be read. So it's going to pause and try to collect that from the user. Now, that being said, this doesn't mean that you have to use a cn.ignore after and before every single CN statement. Since we know that CN is going to read all the way through our new line characters, if you only use it to collect data without spaces, basic CN should never leave any information in the buffer for you. So this is things like first names, patient weight, patient age. Getline, however, we know, stops right before that new line character. That means that if you're using getline, and you're going to collect information after it, you need to use a cn.ignore to clear this character here out of the buffer before you can collect that next piece. Let's go check it out for ourselves. Now we know that we need to address this line right here. We could either go ahead and add a cn.ignore here, but that wouldn't help us out for collecting the patient's full name. So what we need to do is replace the CN statement with a getline function. So getline, and then we want to initialize patient name here. Okay, great. So now this should work for us. Let's go ahead and run it. All right, here we go. Awesome. There we go, and all of our information is correct, and we got Patrick's full name. This is way more professional and provides a much better user experience. Bravo. Way to go, everyone. You have now mastered the basics of input-output. I know this was kind of a lot, but again, rewatch this little mini-series as many times as you need to before you move on. If you'd like to practice CN and getline a little bit more, try to recreate the interview scene in your program. Prompt the user with the questions, use getline or CN as appropriate for the response, and then display a transcription of it back to them. Well, that's all for now. So I'll be seeing you later. Did you see what I did there? Thanks for watching. And remember, no one can do your ideas like you can. Go build it.